Let's let's actually move a little from that tangent and talk about leadership generally. And I want to bring in now another very topical matter we've seen. So I want to look at it from leadership and the standpoint of milking state resources, self-aggrandizement, asset declaration, and more. And I'll go to Dr. Theo Echampong first on this beat. So you followed the Achimota saga and Sir John. I mean, we know the dynamics, so I don't want us to belabor the point. But what is your real reading of what has happened? Take out the Owu family and all the dynamics. We have a public servant basically willing out public property to private individuals. And then there's the extended matter of assets and how rapidly they've been acquired within a certain space of time and all of that. What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many facets to it. There are three things that stick out for me. Number one, conflict of interest. And in this country, it looks as though most of our laws, to borrow Professor Azar, are just mere suggestions, So we have laws on paper, but nobody really implements it, right? So there's lots of conflict of interest, and Sir John's issue is just an example of what takes place across all strata of the Ghanaian sort of society. The second issue also really comes down to the campaign financing and the extent to which people get into power, pretty much with a view, for me, not necessarily to serve in the collective public interest, because somebody actually put you or financed your campaign, and it looks as though they must make those political returns from that. So in that context, it just becomes sometimes an asset and contract and procurement grabbing spree in that regard. And in relation to the point about campaign financing and the laws and our inability to check all these things, it really, for me, is at the heart of a lot of the issues that we're witnessing in the current sort of political dispensation. Because I talk to a lot of people, I engage a lot, and what is quite clear is that there's this sense of disillusionment amongst a lot of the population, but some of them then see the opportunity to actually break free from poverty by entering politics, right? Because that is like the quickest way to become a millionaire overnight. So you see this really incestuous relationship taking place across all strata, where people just want to get into public service, not for public service on its own sake, but it's just an avenue to break free from poverty. And it goes down to campaign financing, goes down to our inability to enforce the laws, because they have just become, like I said, mere suggestions. And the fact that sometimes people don't even see that what they're actually doing is clear conflict of interest. But hey, who's going to call them to order?
Good question, which makes me wonder whether we are angry enough. Because look at the dynamics. Asset declaration is in the bin. They know it. The law has its own stipulations. They don't follow it. No asset declaration, and they are in public service. But it doesn't give you comfort that we've heard from the minority in Parliament calling for a thorough investigation into this. We've also heard from the Lands and Natural Resources Minister, who has said, we are going to investigate this. But some have said maybe he shouldn't even be the person doing this, while others have lauded him for his speedy response to the matter. Because guess what? We could go in the past, and who knows what we could unearth from there about similar situations. What's your take on that? And what would you want to see from such an investigation?
I think the investigation is fine. There are different facets to it. What the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources itself would do. But I think for me, the most important investigation in all of this is that of the Office of the Special Prosecutor. For me, the comfort there perhaps is the fact that on paper, they're meant to be independent and they're meant to find elements of criminality slash corruption involved in some of those, properties that were acquired. Of course, the man is dead and gone. But look, this is really for me the honestness. The more we poke, the more we stare, the more you will find that across both sides of the political divide in Ghana, a lot of people, even people sitting in parliament, have acquired properties, have acquired things that ordinarily cannot be justified by the income that they're earning in public service. That is the elephant in the room that we're all staring here. So to the extent that we really want to reform this and we don't want it to be tokenist, then what should really happen is to enforce the asset declaration regime, but also to make some of them public, that we should be able to see. You came into office, you said you had 2 houses, you had X amount of money in your bank account. After 4 or 5 years of being in office, we should be able to see or tell how come suddenly you have 15 extra, bits of property somewhere here. Those lifestyle audits are quite important. But for me, that is really the crux of the matter, to the extent that the Sir John issue is just the tip of the iceberg. And it needs a collective consensus across the board to really, stem or nip this issue in the bud.
Mr. Obeng, let me take off right from there, because basically taking the wind out of my sail. The tip of the iceberg. People say we've just scratched the surface with the Sir John issue, and that there's a whole lot more rot that if we took the time to go back, and it's not just this, regime, but if we took our time to go back, we would unearth many more. Maybe a lot of them not from Achimota, but even the rest of our reserves. I mean, how is it possible for someone to be saying, you chiefs and all of that, don't allow people to get into our reserves and do X, Y, Z, while the people themselves are doing that, people in authority? So what then? Should this be the catalyst for us to say, thus far, no farther, and we're going to stem the tide of this? And how would we go about it?
Well, you see, in every developmental process, nation building process, there comes a time when, some decisions must be made based on, circumstances that are happening around us. And for me, this is but the best time to actually start having the conversation and real action on matters relating to asset declaration as one of the ways of dealing with this perennial issue of corruption that we have actually had, in this our country. Now, look at it this way. Corruption is defined simply as abuse of entrusted power for private gain. And so think about the number of people, including this case of, Sir John, which, with all the things that has been alleged and they are being investigated. So we wait for the results of the investigation. How people who are in government, who are in positions of authority, even including civil servants, are able to abuse entrusted power entrusted to them for private gain. Typical case of what the definition of corruption is. And Dr. Champon makes a very interesting point, which I think should qualify for a quotable quote, as people taking opportunity to break through from poverty by entering politics. And we're seeing too many of these, in our country, and it's a worry. And for me, you ask about how we can go around these issues. One too many times we have sat around the table as civil society with the ministry responsible for Justice Attorney General, with the Auditor General, to talk about this issue of conduct of public officers bill, which will come to sanitize our asset declaration regime. We have made proposals upon proposals on what must change with our asset declaration regime. They have refused to take these matters up. The bill has been in and out of Parliament.
When you say they, whom are you referring to? The parliamentarians?
The political class.
And is
the
it,
political class.
Is it so the political class? Why do you feel
Political
that
class.
is? Why do you feel that is?
Well, they have cited so many very, very, in my opinion, ridiculous excuses on why this cannot, the proposals cannot hold. They have cited culture as a reason why we cannot have people publish their assets, because people will come after them and family members will know what they owe. They've spoken about how they think that the current regime, where you just lodge what you have as your assets with the Auditor General and nobody can open it until a problem looms as the problem, and we have always said that somebody can simply submit a sheet of paper that is blank, knowing that nobody's ever going to check. We've spoken about how, if we don't have an asset declaration regime that is robust, people may not necessarily be acquiring assets, but they may come to power very broke and have some huge liabilities, and you may not even see them, having the cars and the mansions, but they are paying off huge debts, which would usually not be very evident in the lifestyles that they get to live. Right. And yet the political class, and I use the term political class because this has not only been an issue of the current government, even members in opposition in parliament have usually not supported matters relating to the conduct of public officers bill. And for me, there comes a time in a country's life when an issue happens and it becomes that straw that breaks the camel's back, that makes us move forward. When you talk about asset declaration and conduct of public officers bill, citizens and many of us see it in a very abstract manner. We cannot relate. But this is a classical case of relating to it, where we have someone who takes up office, does not declare his assets. Within the period that he's in office, we see the kinds of things that are actually dated during the period that he's in office, including issues that are supposed to be part of the things that he's supposed to supervise as the authority that has been put in that particular office. So this provides us an opportunity to check our asset declaration regime. It provides Parliament the opportunity to go beyond the rhetorics and start ensuring that they are asking for the conduct of public officers bill to be brought back to Parliament. And when it is brought back, they must expedite action on it. It goes to the point of also those of us in civil society and in the fourth estate taking advantage of the right to information law to request to be able to find out the people who are in authority now, members of parliament, senior staffers in civil service, appointed officials, who and who has declared their assets at the very minimum, who and who has declared their assets and who have not declared. Because we cannot wait for some of these things to happen before we get to realize that one person or the other have actually not declared their assets. We should be asking
Actually, there are many of them who have not declared their assets. We should put
that out. We should put that out for people to know that you've been appointed. You are asked to declare your assets once every 4 years at the beginning of taking up office, at the end of it, within the 4-year interval. And person A, B, C, and D have not done that, so that they cannot hide behind, the smoke screen and be doing some of the things that they are doing. But they know that the people will put their foot to the fire.
Right. Let me bring in Godfred on this matter. All important, because even as we talk about taxation and raising revenue and all of that, if it's just going to be siphoned into individual pockets, what's the use? I mean, sometimes you talk about, look, in the debate about the e-levy, a lot of young people I interacted with said, I don't have, confidence in what it's going to be used for. And that is a problem. And that is part of what we're seeing here. But is this our wake-up call as a country? Is it time for us to be angry enough and compel our leadership to say, do the right thing or we're going to punish you? Look, we have the instance where in the United States, Yahya Jammeh and everything he's done and whatever he amassed from his country, Gambia. Now, one of his mansions worth $3.5 million has been confiscated. If maybe that was sold and the resources given to his state, Gambia, that would be a step in the right direction. Is that what we should get to? You get these assets, we find out these assets were not acquired, you cannot give any explanation for them. The state should go ahead and enforce the law, confiscate these, and maybe that will serve as some sort of deterrent. What do you think? Do we have Godfred on the line?
Hello?
Yes, Guildfred, did you catch that?
Yes, I'm saying I think that is a step in the right direction. First of all, before we even get there, I think we need to tighten the rules. And as Same indicated, what if at the point that we want to even verify these assets, we find there's nothing? So I think we really need to promote transparency and accountability, right from the laws that we put in place to the enforcement of these laws. Many a time that politicians pledge to deepen democracy in this country and they want to carry on all the attributes. But when it comes to real action, then they tend to draw back. And this is what has brought us to this level. And sometimes we turn and just blame democracy, that democracy is not working for us. Meanwhile, what we need to do in those democratic environments or within the democratic culture to ensure that we get the maximum benefit from this regime, we shy away from them. If you have asset declaration regime without verification, then it is nothing, because you can't verify whether the person has made a true statement or not. You have no power to determine. So first of all, I think we need to tighten some of these rules to ensure that people who are put in public office can even boast about their integrity. And again, it also goes to also ensure that people have trust, because we know what you have before you came. And we cannot just imagine or say things that, oh, this man came, acquired this and that from nowhere. If right from the onset you have done this, then everyone will have confidence that by the time you left office, everything that you acquired was legitimate and your integrity is intact. So I think, one, we need to tighten the rules, and even some of the suggestion has been, well, why do you allow the person to even assume office before they declare their assets? If they are willing to go into public office and come out and say our hands are clean, then the transparency must even begin right from there. They have to fill their assets and declare their assets even before they get into office.
Absolutely.
If they can't, then they back off. So I think issues about transparency, issues about accountability must be part and parcel of the laws that we promote. If not, we would draft just any law which cannot bite. The same issue is related to the issue about conflict of interest. It is one of the major sources of corruption in this country, but we tend not to mind it. And what are even the repercussions when people find themselves in this conflict of interest situation? Issues about the conduct of public officers, especially with regard to how they exercise their discretion. We have said this over and over again, and public officials can just do anything and give any flimsy excuse. Sometimes they don't even give any excuse. They don't justify. Look at how this land has been given to the family. It started from 90. Now we are talking about 300. And you have people at the Forestry Commission who lead and give portion to this family, come back again and give an excuse which cannot be accepted. That we found later that where we gave to the family was not where we were supposed to give to the family. Right. They go back again and come back and give the same reason. And how do they even justify it? When the family came back and said, we have given leases and grants and whatever out, so if you should change or vary this, it's going to be to our disadvantage. Who went and checked whether what the family said was true? And if we don't hold some of our public officers to that level of integrity, they will do whatever they want to do. So I think we need to tighten the loopholes, and we need to tighten them very well so that people in authority will know that even when they don't want to act right, they will be compelled to do so by law.
And I guess that is what applies in other regimes that we seek to copy. It is not that people there want to abide by these, but the fact is that it is the system, and it will compel you to do so. But let's look at another angle to the dynamics we're going to consider. The final angle, actually, it has to do with money matters, the economy. The monetary rate or the policy rate has gone up by 19%, 200 basis points. And that has given us a lot of cause for worry, because what this also means is that it's going to have a ripple effect on the lending rate. And I've seen, instances where some banks have started, sending out to people who have facilities with them that, look, you're going to have to pay more in terms of your monthly payments, or you're going to have to extend how long you're going to be making payments for. That is the reality. What does this mean? I've heard the likes of Professor Gachi say that, well, we're in dire economic straits and this is the way government has chosen to go. For you, Dr. Theo Echampo, what is your reflection? Was this needed at this time? Because it means in the next 2.5 months, 3 months, what it means is that it's going to be even more expensive to borrow from the banks.
Look, the central bank was actually caught in a very difficult position, either to hike rates or not to hike rates. And each of them comes with different policy trade-offs. The biggest threat facing the economy at the moment from a monetary side is inflation. And if you look at the inflation readings from the statistical service, the latest one for April was actually 23.6%. If you compare that to the year before, so April of last year was 8.5%, right? So you're seeing almost like a threefold increase in inflation year on year. And if you break that down, you can see that food inflation is actually the biggest driver of the overall inflation or inflationary push that we're seeing currently. So to that extent, the monetary policy was being or took the action in an attempt to curtail money supply, and ultimately that then helps to bring down the level of inflation. Again, remember that the central bank has a target originally of inflation being between 6
to 10%
and 10%. That was the range. And all the numbers and all the readings since January of this year basically has been out of or outside of that range. So that's really like the difficult choice that the MPC had to make to hike up the rates. Some of us perhaps had even been calling or saying that the rate hikes should have happened a little bit earlier. The central bank should have been a little bit more proactive in that regard. And the runaway inflation we're seeing would have, come down a little bit. So the biggest concern is inflation. All other issues in terms of the cost of servicing your loan facility or going to borrow and all of that, for sure, those things will go up one way or the other. And that could also ultimately be or have some negative repercussions on the economy, at least in the short term. But those are the trade-offs that need to be made. And if you don't have enough shocks or buffers and you're burning through your reserves to support the economy, and you have all the issues of debt management also as well, then, really when push comes to the shove, things like inflation is just going to, force the policymakers down a path that then ultimately even hurts, future growth prospects.
Very briefly on this one, so was there an alternative? You say we could have done this earlier, looking at all the shocks, inflation, fuel prices, food prices, everything, and all the dynamics we have to face. What alternative or alternatives would government have had, the central bank? Instead of doing this, what could they have done instead?
So remember that what the central bank does is also complementary to what the central government does. So I'm talking Ministry of Finance on the fiscal policy side of things. And both of them must go hand in hand, right, or be synchronized. So we cannot have a monetary policy instrument or tool like we're doing now, trying to fight inflation, and then at the same time, your whole tax reform effort and your fiscal effort, is also out of gear in that respect. So I think what is very much important now, the central bank has done its bit. They've supported the economy. They've, used bits of their dollar reserves to support the economy. And in fact, if you look at the reserve holdings, it's actually gone down from about 4.4 months to about 3.7 months of import cover, according to the latest statistics released by the central bank for May of this year. So you can see their attempt to do their bit to support or to prop up the economy. The issue really has been, in my view, on the fiscal side of things, how we raise money and how we spend money, and a lot of the wasteful expenditure that also then tends to take place. So that's where I think the complementary actions and policies need to come from, and we need to start seeing the government really putting all its efforts, to sort of address a lot of the issues, not just revenue, but importantly on, in my view, expenditure rationalization. Because even the e-levy, for all the talk and all the cry, some of the numbers coming through doesn't really indicate that those targets will be hit or met at the end of the year.
Thank you so much, Dr. Theo Champon. To wrap the conversation with Sam and Guildfred very quickly. So I'm going to throw this question to both of you, and I'll give you each a bite of about a minute and a half. I'll start with you, Sam. So we also have the regional elections of the MPP. They're going to go out for chairman, general secretary, and others. And it also makes for interesting reading. The Ashanti and Central regions are hot, but in the Central region, for example, a last-minute situation there, legal situation, injunction as far as the Akumfi constituency is concerned, has left that region hanging. They are not going to have their contest within this timeline. It has to do with TESCON reps, Council of Elders members not being known, so to speak. But when you look at the dynamics, what we've seen so far, the contest in the Ashanti region, Chairman Wuntumi being contested by Ordiniho and others, what is your reading of the situation and what can we expect?
Well, I must say that I'm not as close to the action as perhaps you and everybody else. Of course, for the past couple of weeks, I've been working from our country program here in Sierra Leone, but of course, we've been monitoring this from the media, and we know that time and again we have parties when they have their internal primaries, it being very keenly contested, especially also when the party is in power. Because I cited Dr. Theo Champon's quote, earlier on, and I will cite it again. We know how people consider these as very, very important for them to be able to have a piece of, the power that the party currently, controls. And so we expected a keen context. The dirty side of it and some of the nasty scenes that we have seen are the ones that are regrettable. To have these things being keenly contested was to be expected. We expect that in politics and in democracy, yes, these keen contests must go on, but in the end, they must go on in a way that are sane, in a way that are courteous, so that we do not have people being, hurt, property being destroyed in the lead up to the elections. We can only wish the NPP well, even as they go into these elections. And to say that we expect that as a party that touts themselves as one that believes in democracy, they should come out of these processes showcasing that, because anything short of that will further, lower the reputation that they have been able to build in the past as a democratic institution.
Guildfred, for you, especially on the back of what we've seen at the constituency level? Hello, Guildfred. All right, it appears we've lost Guildfred Boateng Esiama, research analyst with the CDD. It would have been interesting to get his take on those dynamics. But gentlemen, We're very grateful for your time. Thank you so much. Guilford Boateng, a research analyst with the CDD. Sam Obeng, Executive Director, Africa Parliamentary Network, and Dr. Theo Echampong, economist, also giving us some scope on the economic situation of our country and the rise in the monetary policy rate. So this is the first belt of our discussion. When we return after the break, we're looking at exactly that, the MPP's regional elections and the way forward.